Where are we in the Irish border? This is a puzzle.
Well, it is a puzzle. I think it's crucial. I mean, in many senses, experts said at the time Ireland was a major issue, and the Brexiteers said, no, you shouldn't listen to experts. It's not a problem. We'll work it out. And it's quite clear that Ireland's a major issue. I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time traveling back and forth between Belfast and Dublin, and it's like driving between New York and Connecticut. There's no border, there's nothing. And the problem will be if you have a hard Brexit, there'll have to be a hard border there. Nobody in the north wants it, nobody in the south wants it. You're going to have a wall which basically, who's going to sit there? Is it going to be English soldiers? Makes absolutely no sense. The other worry is that the May government is propped up by the DUP, the Protestants, and have a particular view about this. But the reality is that I don't think there's going to be, it's possible that there will be a hard border in Ireland. I think this means that a hard Brexit is almost inconceivable because it's just not something that's likely to happen. The people don't want it. And that's been a major problem for May, who chose to go down the road of hard Brexit and is now being forced to basically try and make it as little change from now as possible. So I think Ireland was crucial. It always was going to be crucial. I think I've talked on Bloomberg about this many times. Right. But Ireland essentially prevents the craziness of a hard Brexit occurring. And the reason is that people can flow into Ireland. People who live in Poland can come to Ireland. They can get to Northern Ireland, and they can get on a boat and go to Scotland. And I think that's how it's going to remain. I mean, that's really the big issue.
And another big issue,
of course.
We have to turn to trade because the EU and the UK, this has been ongoing. So far, who's winning here?
Well, I think the reality is, again, that the European Union have been winning because they've been completely credible. 27 countries voting together saying you can't just take an a la carte menu and pick and choose what you like. It's a fixed price. If you want to play, then you have to pay, and here's how it is. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is that the negotiators keep saying the Brits haven't produced anything credible. They haven't produced a credible plan. All they've talked about is having your cake and eating it. And obviously the reality for the EU 27 is if you make it so terribly easy and wonderful for the UK to leave, then the danger will be that other countries will want to leave as well. So I think what's happened is that the Brexiteers have essentially been mugged by reality. The promises they made, remember, there's many millions of pounds every week available for the NHS. Well, now it turns out exactly the opposite is true. There's probably something like a £50 billion divorce bill. And so that's crucial. I just would say a couple of things, though. The big thing as well is that the economy has not been doing well. People have been struggling, and basically Europe has been growing pretty fast. And that's the comparison. So this is all coming down to, I think, not a cliff edge.
Danny, I think that's an interesting point. And to follow up on what Shery just said, I mean, in the United States, though, when I talk to Republicans, they are trying to figure out how does Harley-Davidson CEO or the Boeing CEO actually win over the workers who backed candidate Donald Trump and over there, that type of populist rhetoric. How do you win over the diehards who are saying, hey, wait a minute, no, we want to leave?
Well, I think obviously there's the reality that there are diehards, but I think a lot of people over there, a lot of it was a protest vote. The protest vote saying, I'm not happy about how things are going, but I don't think this is actually going to happen. So there is a large group of people who say, I want this to happen. But it's also very localized. I mean, the reality is that London is hugely voted for Remain. So did Northern Ireland, so did Scotland, and so did all the big cities. So yes, there is there's a strong group who wants it, but I think there's a reality check, and it was a pretty narrow win by a couple of points, as it was in the U.S. So I think the reality is that people are essentially being given a choice. Do you want this thing where the costs are huge? And the evidence in the data is that once you say to people, well, actually, if you have it, living standards are going to be impacted, you're going to be worse off, people's views have evolved. And I'm just looking at the latest polls. They've been pretty close for a long time, but in the latest data, majority of people say they would vote to remain, and a lot of them are looking for a second referendum. So it ain't over till it's over. The fat lady hasn't left the hotel yet.
So, Danny, Kevin brought up the United States. We have to talk about President Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs. What does that signal for the future of a U.S.-UK trade deal after Brexit?
Right. I mean, the way it's been treated in the UK is that people say, well, eventually you end up seeing that the European Union ends up being, we're with their allies after much complaining and saying they put tariffs on Harley-Davidson. You see that, eventually they're pushed out and away and said, okay, it's not really meant to cover Australia and Canada and the European Union.
Right.
I think the way it's been treated in the UK is, any possible idea that if you went to Brexit and then afterwards it would be really easy to do a deal with America has been put to the wayside. I think that's generally how it's been treated. The UK doesn't feel that special anymore. I mean, it was subject to those tariffs.